Howdy folks, I'm Meet the Name, and today I have a question for you. Do you like giant robots? Well, if you watched my last review, shameless plug here, you'd know that at least I do. And in my journey to consume more robot media, I discovered an interesting little film called Robot Jox. Now, there are two things that stand out with this film. The first is that it almost looks like a prototype for what Pacific Rim would be. The mechs are slow and a bit clunky, but they hit hard. There's a great emphasis on their weight that makes them seem somewhat believable, despite the fact that they are clearly plastic models being moved through stop motion. The pilot's movements and mannerisms in the film help influence how the machines move, and they have a series of secret weapons that they can deploy at a moment's notice. Now, Pacific Rim obviously didn't rip off the film. It still had plenty of its own differences and originality, but it is kinda neat to compare these similarities and realize that the best giant robots gotta have a bit of heft to them. I like big bots, and I cannot lie. Okay, I should really delete that. The second thing that stands out with this film is its production history. Apparently the co-writer for the film, Joe Haldeman, who is also a science fiction author, frequently fought with the director Stuart Gordon over what the tone of the film should be. Haldeman wanted the film's tone to be more serious and gritty, while Gordon wanted to appeal more towards a child demographic. The result is a film with a mishmash of tone and story that's both silly and also shockingly violent at times. There are things here that I'm honestly surprised did show up. It's rated PG and it has visible blood, casual racism, murder, lots of violence, and even some nudity. Oh, and the film's production was so costly that it caused the distribution company Empire Pictures to go bankrupt, delaying the film's release for 2 years. And the bad news doesn't end there, because the film would go on to become a box office flop, only making $1,272,977. Reviews ripped it apart, and the film faded into obscurity. But, like many films that struggled during that time, it eventually did start to form a cult following, and more recent reviews have become more positive towards it. But with all that said, I'm excited to share my own thoughts. But first, what the heck is this film all about? 50 years after a nuclear holocaust has decimated the Earth, two major factions emerge. One is the Market, which is clearly just America, while the other side is the Confederacy, which seems to be an XP for the Soviet Union. Remember that this film was made during a time when the Cold War was still a thing. Because the world is so messed up, both sides decide to ban all war and instead settle things in a more civilized way, by waging one-on-one fights with giant robots in order to end disputes over territory. The people that pilot these giant robots are known as Robot Jox. You know, it's in the title. In this film, our protagonist Achilles, Gary Graham, who fights for the Market, gets into an accident while fighting his fiendish opponent Alexander, Paul Kozlow. This accident resulted in the deaths of over 300 spectators. Disturbed by these events, Achilles chooses to retire from robot fighting, and soon a new generation of genetically engineered robot jocks, or Gen Jox for short, must take the mantle. But when a Gen Jox named Athena, Anne Maria Johnson, is selected to fight in Achilles' stead, a decision must be made by him that very well may impact the entirety of the post-apocalyptic blood sport. Oh, the drama! As you can tell, there's a decent amount of world building to this whole setting. We have two large factions in a supposedly annihilated world, we have giant robots and hotshot pros who pilot them, and the result is a story that doesn't really use these tools as much as it should. For instance, the world was allegedly decimated by a nuclear holocaust, and yet, after 50 years, things still kinda look okay? Like, people occasionally wear masks, and apparently meat is rare, but the environments and buildings don't really seem that worse for wear. Unless you look close at the set design, that is. We don't get to live much in this world, and are instead only given a look at the intricacies of how the robot jocks operate. Which isn't exactly a bad thing. The world is more window dressing for giant robot fights. Except we barely see the giant robots fight. There's maybe 3 scenes in total of robots fighting, and those are basically against the same 2 mechs every time. Not a lot of varieties involved here. So yeah, we do get a lot of training montages, interpersonal struggles between the jocks themselves, and a subplot about a spy that we quite frankly didn't need. There's also like a really half-assed love story side plot that just feels kind of forced, in more ways than one. It's sort of uncomfortable. And this really highlights the production struggles that were mentioned previously. That battle to maintain a fun family film about robots fighting, and a blood sport with serious ramifications for whoever wins or loses. And the characters themselves don't seem to help it much. Now, personally, I thought the acting was all fine. Folks put a lot more effort into this film than it really deserved, especially Gary Graham. Dude kills it as Achilles. But he doesn't really have much of a character arc. No one really does besides maybe Michael Aldridge's character, Tex Conway, who is probably one of the most American characters I've ever seen in a film. Casual racism unfortunately included. There just really isn't anyone all that memorable, which is surprising because with such a small cast, it was pretty easy to keep track of everyone. I will say that it was refreshing to see characters that look like ordinary people. If this film were made today, everyone would be super handsome, and Chris Pratt would probably play one of the robots or something. Obviously, appearances are an unfortunate part of why some actors get chosen for a role, but I feel that for this film it really was more about personality and acting ability, which I think should always be the most important things to consider. And the fact that everyone could give it their all despite how messy the script probably was, is a testament to everyone that acted in this film. The budget was estimated to be around $6.5 to $10 million. And I'm sure a good chunk was spent on the talent, because boy, the set design definitely didn't get much love. If I could describe the set design of this film, it would be, what can we afford and how quickly can we set it up? A lot of it appears to be just sheet metal and cardboard painted white or gray. Again, for a world that's still recovering from a nuclear holocaust, everything seems surprisingly clean and cheap. Looking at the cockpits of the mechs, you'd swear that a single breeze could knock some of the walls down. CRTs are just inserted into walls in the command centers, and a big piece of training equipment is just a bunch of pipes that were haphazardly welded together. But by God did they make the most of it. Obviously, for the budget that they had, they weren't going to get Star Wars level sets. But I feel that more reliance on camera tricks or good lighting definitely could have went a long way in making some of the more glaring issues the set design had more bearable. And then there's the effects. I'll just start off and say that I do love the robot designs in this film. They look so bulky and clumsy. How anyone decided that this is how war should be settled was a freaking genius. They give me Battletech vibes with that retro-futuristic look that they have. And in stop motion, I love them even more. Now, this is another fact about myself, but I positively adore stop motion animation. Heck, I used to rewatch Coneheads repeatedly just to see the Garthox scene. Even the clunkiest stop motion is endearing in my eyes. And Robot Jox is no different. I would describe the bot's movements as being jerky and slow, which tells you that these things must be an absolute nightmare to pilot effectively. And then imagine fighting another dude in one of these things, and having them fire freaking lasers at you. Speaking of which, oof, the lasers. Yeah, those did not age well at all. A lot of these special effects don't look the best, and even all the stop motion in the world couldn't distract me from how awkward they were, especially the use of blue screen. Or was it green screen? I honestly don't know the difference between the two. Someone please let me know in the comments below. But again, with how sparse the robot fights are, these are also sorta negligible. But I will say that the final fight in this film is actually really impressive if you ever watch it. Moving on, I want to briefly discuss the score. I would describe this music as being the cheesy, orchestral kind of stuff that you'll usually find in a family film. It's nothing that's all that memorable, so the music wasn't bad, but there really isn't much left to say on it. So overall, would I recommend Robot Jox? Well, that answer would be, eh. It certainly isn't the worst film, and the giant robots are fun to see when they actually show up. But the story is very lackluster, and honestly the characters aren't much better. It isn't a heart-thumping, adrenaline-fueled spectacle of robot violence. It's kinda slower paced, full of a lot more drama than you would expect, and moments will make you wonder, who was this supposed to be made for? And yet, it's also a fun curiosity to behold. Looking at it, your mind starts to think up of ideas of how it could have been executed well. You begin to imagine what this would look like if it were somehow remade with modern technology. Because despite these grievances and nitpicks, this film still has a soul at its center that begs to be seen, that begs to be given a chance. And if you give it a chance, you might see that sometimes it's nice to just watch an old B or C, or heck even D-list film. And maybe it'll even encourage you to dig through more of these films, and to find the ones that were never given a fair chance. Robot Jox may have crashed and burned, but there's certainly something in that rubble worth salvaging, and I certainly can't wait to see what else there is to find. Howdy folks, thank you all so much for watching this video. I know that this probably came out of left field, but I always like to keep folks on their toes. As you can tell, the giant robot bug that bit me forced me to make this video. Hopefully it'll be the last giant robot related thing we'll be seeing for a while. Unless folks want more giant robots, that is. Also, I'd just like to thank you all so much for the reception to my Transformers Victory review. You are all truly too kind. I would also like to thank you all for 115 subscribers. Yowza! That's a lot of new folks. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Doing so really does help me out. Also, I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky, so feel free to follow me in order to get notified when new videos show up. Links are in the description. With all that said, I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Super Go
Never forget the day your home was invaded by Super GoBots, each sold separately from Tonka.